Good morning, everyone! I almost said Vietnam.
Hello. Evening.
Hi, I'm Bryant Francis, contributing editor to Gamasutra, and if you are watching this, you are on the Gamasutra Twitch channel. If you can hear me, feel free to just weigh in the chat. Make sure we know, that all our audio and stuff is working okay. I'm joined by two wonderful people here in the bottom left-hand corner. Alex and Melanie. Can you two say hi?
After you, Melanie.
Oh, well, hello everyone.
And can you both introduce yourselves, what you do, and why you're on the stream with me?
I'm going first, I guess.
You sure are.
Alright. Hello, I'm Melanie. I made a silly game called Transformize, and Bryant asked me to talk about it. So here I am.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I'm Alex Waro, editor at Gamasutra. I haven't made any silly games that I've shown anyone yet. But we're here to talk about your talk at GDC, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the story of a 70 million player indie game, the post-mortem of Transformice, which is a pretty wide scope for a talk.
And it's what we're playing right now, by the way. This is Transformice.
Yeah, and this game's been going for about 6 or 7 years, right? Since 2010?
Yeah, almost 7 years.
So that is like a significant player count. We're talking like 70 million people. I don't want to get too deeply into what you're going to talk about in your talk, because I want to save that for your talk. But what I do want to know is how you came to work on this game in the first place, and sort of how you came to get into games at all.
Well, that's a pretty broad question as well.
Yeah, it's going to ease it in.
Yeah, I wasn't actually expecting to be in the games industry from the beginning. Like, I made some studies to make illustrations for kids' books initially. And so I made some studies into art and design in order to do some freelancing work and stuff. And I was really hooked into video games, obviously. And I was much of a fan of the video game called Dofus, which is a French video game. It's a massively multiplayer game, mostly popular in France, but not that much in the international.
Right.
It's made by the video game studio called Ankama. And I was really hooked with this game, and I made a lot of fan art of it. And that's how they noticed me, because I was posting so much fan art on their forums. And they were like, hey, why don't you come work for us? And I'm like, but I don't know how to code. I don't know how to make games. But they told me, like, we don't care. You know how to draw. We need people who know how to draw. So come and join in. And that's how I learned some various software and stuff. And I began making a video game, like working for a video game. And that's how everything started. And that's how I got into the industry. And that's where I've met my associate, Jean-Baptiste, because he was a programmer there and I was an artist, and we had to work a lot together to optimize the game. And so we decided to make a small game on our free time. And that's how Transformice was born.
Nice. I would wonder how you came to settle on the idea of making it massively multiplayer, because we talk to a lot of developers who make their own games in their free time and sometimes spin off and start their own studio like you did, or they just keep it all on the side. Nobody ever makes an MMO. That seems really hard.
It is. Yeah, it is. It's, yeah, you can even say it's a pretty bad idea to make an MMO with only 2 people.
Yeah, you could say that. You might maybe say that.
Well,
but
we
didn't say that.
Yeah, no, we didn't. We didn't expect it to be a massively multiplayer game. We the original scope of the game was only like 100 players tops, with like 10 players per room. And you are on the dragon map. Just claim the dragon to get to the top. And we didn't expect it to be an MMO, and it kind of took us by surprise. And we had a lot of sleepless nights to fix everything, to add servers, to fix bugs, to deal with community management and stuff. And yeah, it was pretty hectic. And but we would do it again. But I'm not going to spoil my talk that much because I'm going lengthy into that.
So, but what happened? So what happened was, and correct me if I'm wrong. So you all launched this game, which started off. I'm playing this in the Steam client, but it was a browser MMO. That's where I discovered it personally.
But yeah, it still is browser.
Yeah.
I'm playing it with you in the browser.
Yeah. And what I remember when this launched was, and it just kind of like, for some reason, it just crept around the internet, almost like a little mice, going after the cheese. Like everyone, it found a fan base, even though you all didn't necessarily expect it to have a really large one. So how did that feel to have this small little idea that you didn't really think anyone would really latch onto, and then have it sort of explode like that?
Well, you just do with what you've got. Like, it's really exciting to have a game that performs well. And we just released the game originally on one little French forum. We posted the link and we were like, "Hey, come on, try our little game. It will be fun." And we just wanted a couple of hundred people would be really great. And suddenly it took off, and we just tried to do everything we could to manage it. And so we didn't have much time to think about it. Actually, we were so much into fixing the game and making sure people would be able to play and have fun. We didn't ask ourselves a lot of questions, but really it was exciting at the time to kind of know that you made something that is almost a hit, just, because you have so many players, you feel that you're onto something. And we were full employed at that time, and working on another game, and it was our chance to do what. To found our studio to live the indie life, and it was very exciting to know that we had a working product, and that we would be able eventually to turn it into a profitable product at some point.
You talk about it being exciting. Was it scary to quit your job and start a new business?
Yeah, totally, totally. In my talk, I kind of. Present it like, yeah, it was so exciting, but really inside I was so scared because I was leaving a very secure job at this company, a very secure contract that I would be able to have for a lifetime, and a comfortable salary, and an exciting project that is Dofus, because I love that game. And suddenly you leave all that and you go into the wild, and you're not sure this is going to make it, because when we left our jobs to found our company, we weren't making that much money. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was definitely scary.
How did you?
I apologize. I need to point out real quick. Actually, we're playing Just for now, and I've deliberately hidden the chat. But the mice we're playing with have actually noticed that Melanie is in the chat. And that she's here too. Like we're in game, and they realized that one of the admins is here, so they're starting to talk about it in the chat.
Yeah, they always do that. Every time I get into the game, I get a ton of whispers of players telling me, "Hey, notice me, notice me."
I guess I sort of wanted to follow up on that and sort of get a sense of how you deal with the stress of starting a new studio and striking out on your own. But that was 6 years ago, so maybe it feels a little distant now. Do you remember like what it was like to first get started and how you handled it?
Well, we were so busy that we didn't have much time to self-reflect on ourselves. we kept ourselves so busy that that's how we handled stress, really, just shoving ourselves into work. Eventually, I did a burnout, of course, because that cannot go forever.
Yeah.
So this is definitely not something I would recommend, and I would definitely recommend taking care of yourself and learn how not to overdo it, and learn to listen to yourself, and not shove yourself into work, trying to hide yourself from what you're feeling.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible to take care of yourself adequately when you're trying to run an always online game with a small team? Like, it was just the two of you at first, right? So I imagine that must have been basically 24/7. Someone had to be watching the game and making sure everything was
Yeah,
okay.
totally. For the first year, we were still full employed, and we had that game, and it would crash in the middle of the night or in the weekend, or when we were both offline, and yeah, it was pretty stressful. Well, today we have a much more balanced lifestyle. We take things also a lot more chill than before, because well, we have a lot of securities in place, but we don't stress as much as before when the game goes offline. We're like, yeah, okay, it's offline. It's not a life-threatening kind of problem. It can wait. We are going to fix it. It's going to be okay. And you learn along the way to prioritize your problems and your stress.
Sure.
So yeah, you just have to remember that the world is not going to stop because your game doesn't run perfectly, because it's going to crash, and yeah, just be a lot more chill about it than we were at the time.
So why didn't you quit? You know, in that first year or so, when you were stressing out, when you were on the way to a burnout, and it was such a demand, why didn't you quit? Why was it so important to you to get this game up and running and keep it stable?
Well, obviously, it was my baby. It was something that we created from the ground up, and it was our chance also to go indie, to go our own chief, and it was something we really wanted to do. So we really wanted to take care of the game so that we would be able to have our own company, our own studio, our own project, because
Right.
a lot of things at Ankama weren't going exactly the way we wanted. We were pretty frustrated at management, at crunch time, and conditions of life over there.
Yeah.
And I'm
No,
not going to paint a picture. It's pretty clear.
Yeah, and also you don't need to, because it's a pretty common story, right?
Yeah.
In game development. It's always funny, and you're not the first person. Although this is certainly a remarkable game, but I've talked to more than one developer or designer who has grown frustrated with studio culture and not seeing eye to eye with management and having to work too many hours for what they think is not worth it. And then they go indie, and then they become the manager, and they have to work like 80-hour days for 6 days a week, and it's just or 80-hour weeks. It's just nuts. There's really no way to win. But I guess in this way, it's more exciting to work on something that is deeply important to you and is your own project. I wanted to sort of like ask why you seem to love MMO games so much. You know, massive multiplayer games, because there's this and there's Dofus, and like both are huge. And I wonder what you see of value in a game designed like this, to be constantly seeing other players all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's not that much of massively multiplayer we're in it, but multiplayer really. We really think that multiplayer is an awesome category of games, because games can be awesomely fun, but we believe that they are always funnier in multiplayer. Like gaming is playing is made to be you're meant to play with friends, with your entourage, with your people that you know. It's something that is rooted deep into our genes, or way of society, to play with peers and people. And really believe that multiplayer is a superior kind of genre, because the interaction you can get with people, it's invaluable. You cannot get that into a solo game. You can get other experiences, but multiplayer is really unique, and we want to keep doing multiplayer. Not necessarily massively multiplayer, but play with 5, 10, 20 people. That's what Transform Ice is. You don't really play with much more than 30 people at one time.
Yeah.
So it is massively multiplayer because you have a lot of people playing at the same time. But really, in your room, you are pretty much with. You can play with only 2 friends, for example. So it's not massively anymore. But yeah, we really love multiplayer games. We want to keep doing them, and that's how I think this is how we are going to differentiate ourselves from other developers in the industry.
Yeah, I think you're probably on point. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. We were talking with one of the creative director of Elder Scrolls Online recently, and he was telling us about how his team was beginning to realize that massively multiplayer games don't need to be necessarily the most massive. That people only really have about 200 or so people that they can keep track of in there. That's the max number of social interactions they need to have a fulfilling time in a game like this. How do you do you have any similar thoughts about how many people can game developers get how many people can game developers get players to interact with and still have a fun time, do you think? And do you think MMOs can sort of think about going smaller scale as it tries to pack everyone on the same server at the same point?
Well, it really depends on the gameplay that you want. That's a tricky question, because depending on the gameplay, you can get along with 100 people, but if you take Rocket League, you can only get along with 2 other people on your team, and the rest is going to be so hectic.
You play a lot of Rocket League, right?
Yeah, I do. A lot too much.
No.
So it really depends on the gameplay that you want for your game. Some gameplays are really fit for massively, and others are not. So if you have a gameplay that is really adapted to massively, I think most of the guilds, the tribes, are about 30 to 50 people tops. So I don't think you can get a lot of cohesion. I don't know if that's the word. From a team. You cannot ask a team to work together if there are more than 50, I think.
I am super curious. Is this your first time speaking at GDC?
Yes.
Okay, so A, are you nervous?
Yes.
Don't be. It's going to be great. And B, I would love to know what your sort of general impression is of having grown up as a game player and now a game developer, as far as I know, in France, because we mostly talk to American developers, and I think the 2 scenes are very different. As you mentioned earlier, Dofus is really not a big thing here, but it's huge in France. And what was it like? What is it like to come up in the French game industry, from your perspective? No pressure.
Well, the French game developers are very welcoming. I only, I was so focused on fixing the game that I didn't look a lot on the outside. I didn't do a lot of networking directly when I founded the studio. We were so busy fixing the game that I wasn't looking for other game developers' interaction. And that was clearly a mistake. And networking got me out of very difficult situations. So networking is very important, and I emphasize this in my talk. And but yeah, the French game dev industry is really welcoming. Really. Well, yeah, it's pretty different from the American one, but I'm not exactly sure how I would qualify it. We don't have that much events compared to the American industry or even some other countries in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Poland because of the game, and the game dev industry over there is much more compact. It's more organized, and they have events and stuff. And we're pretty a little behind on that ground. Also, the French are infamous for not speaking English that well. So we don't. In every video game event abroad, we tend to keep together ourselves and not mix with other communities a lot. And I think that's a shame. We are actually the last country of Europe in terms of learning English. And that really feels in some events. Like you can feel that the French are behind on speaking English and gathering and speaking with other communities. So this is something I'm trying to advocate for, trying to make French game dev understand that they need to speak English to keep in this industry. But otherwise, yeah, it's a really fun industry to be in.
Well, your English is fantastic, and my French is non-existent. So as far as I can tell, you're one up on us.
Je parle un peu français, mais c'est plus. C'est plus.
Did I just set you up there to show off your high school French? Is that what
Exactly. Yeah. No. Literally high school French. Fun story. When I was interning at a company here in Los Angeles, I had to translate some French comics, like Wampus, and a few others that we were told were very popular in France, but I'd never heard of them before in my life. But I was able to do it because of that high school French. So you never know in game development or in comics translation when those skills will come in handy.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind if I continue to talk about this, Melanie, but A, I don't want to overstep your talk, and B, I am just fascinated at what it must be like to grow up with an interest in games and animation in France, because we so often talk to developers who, when we say Europe, like, we usually talk to developers from the United Kingdom.
Or Germany. Or Germany.
Or Germany, yeah. We rarely get to talk to developers from France, or, it's usually Japan, Canada, America. So before you studied animation and wound up working in games, like, did you play a lot of games as a kid growing up? Did you have a deep passion for games, or not so much?
Yes, definitely. I had my first game console when I was maybe 5 or 6, and it was a Mega Drive at the time. And I definitely grew up with games. Mostly, I will give my brother that he was a lot into games too, so I was pretty much player 2. Mm-hmm. But he definitely helped into my passion for games and gaming in general. But yeah, I've played some games growing up, but I was pretty monomaniac for some years. I've played like thousands and thousands of hours of Pokemon, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you said you had gone into animation and didn't expect, I think, to be making games. Is that because you was that because you just had a similar passion for art, or is it because you felt like maybe there wasn't a career in games?
Oh yeah, no, I thought at the time that, well, I never thought about being able to get into the game industry, because in my head you had to be a programmer to get into the game industry, and I was so bad at math that it wasn't possibly it couldn't possibly happen to make games for a living. So what can I do? What can I do good? Like, I can draw some kind of, and so how can I earn money by drawing? So just illustrating kids' books, I guess. And yeah, that's how I thought it out. It wasn't very very logical.
It's so interesting that you had a passion for drawing, because when I first looked at Transformice, it reminded me of games like, I think it was called The Incredible Machine. I could be wrong. Like from Sierra back in the 90s.
Yes.
And that game, when I played it as a kid, reminded me of doodling puzzles on paper, and then like having a friend try to solve them, or like try to figure out, like, just in class, just doodles on paper of trying to figure out, like, shapes, triangles, lines, mice, balls. And so,
and I'm just going to cut you on there, because one of our main inspiration was the Incredible Machine and Fantastic Contraption.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I've met the Fantastic Contraption makers at GDC the previous 2 years, and I was able to gift them some plushies and t-shirts, and they were amazed.
Yeah,
nice.
I love those people. They're all Colin and Sarah and the rest of them.
Yeah, they're awesome.
So this is not your first GDC, I gather.
My first GDC was 2 years ago.
Nice. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
Yeah, I was actually. It's funny you mentioned Fantastic Contraption, just because I know I was going to put it on the GDC, the post-mortem for the first Fantastic Contraption on GDC YouTube soon. It was really cool how they took a browser puzzler and turned it into what's now like known as one of like the pioneer VR games.
I tried it at GDC, and it totally sold me on the Vive.
Yeah.
Really, I want to buy a Vive just for Fantastic Contraption. I swear to God.
Yeah. Would you it's a little okay. So like the simplest form of this question is, would you consider making Transformice in VR? But I guess the better question is, what do you think Transformice, or what do you think a game like Transformice would benefit from being in VR? Now that you've been sold on it by Fantastic Contraption.
Oh no, I've been sold by Fantastic Contraption because their gameplay, like building stuff, really has some additional value in VR. Whereas my additional value in Transformice is the hectic real-time multiplayer, which is pretty much it's as good as it gets in a browser. Like, it wouldn't get much better in VR. You wouldn't get a groundbreaking improvement in VR for Transformice. Whereas in Fantastic Contraption, you can turn around the machine and do things in 3D and build your car like you're physically in it. But I don't think that Transformice would really benefit from going to VR, because that's not what the players are here for, I think. Well, that's how I analyze it.
It's interesting.
No, I think you're probably right. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I think the hectic multiplayer. I mean, that's what got me into this game, was the chaos of what's going on. Like this is very simple. But
I'm just one simple argument is that you cannot do massively multiplayer in VR because only 0.1% of the population is equipped.
That's not massive.
Really? Yeah, it's not that massive, really.
Yeah, but actually, what's also funny is your game is massive and hectic and chaotic. And I died. And it's also a game where people mess with each other, but that means something different in VR, right? Like messing with you when you're a little 2D mouse is disconnected. But if I make fun of you, if I tease you, if I torment you in VR, it feels far more personal because of that perspective.
Yeah, totally. There have been quite a lot of articles about that lately, about how to deal with harassment in VR. I thought they were really interesting, and VR is really a huge field to explore that is very daring. And I don't think we are going to go in it because we don't even know how to develop 3D games. So VR, this is daring.
Yeah. Are browser MMOs still popular in France?
Transformice?
Yeah, or not. Well, I know Transformice is still popular, but is the genre? Do people in France still play a lot of MMO games in their browsers?
Well, there are not a lot of MMOs in browsers, really. Pretty much, yeah. There's not much of us left. Like Animal Jam, us. Yeah, I cannot think of much on the top of my head. But no, Transformice, we actually only have 3% of French on Transformice, because they have access to so many different games that are on Steam or other places, and they have pretty good computers, so they can play bigger games, you know. They don't really need browser games to be able to play games. Whereas in more developing countries, like for example Brazil, they don't have very good computers, very good screens, and very good hardware in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so the browser games are still very popular in those countries because it is very light, it is real-time multiplayer, and you cannot get a real-time multiplayer game that is very light nowadays because it takes so much resources. Yeah. So the Flash allows us that to reach developing countries. So no, I don't think France is much fan of browser games anymore.
You mentioned earlier, you made a very good point, of course, that there aren't a lot of people with VR headsets in the world yet. But there are a lot of people with smartphones, with Android and iOS. We're seeing in general, as we watch the industry shift, a number of popular MMO studios are shifting to mobile. We just saw Club Penguin announce a shutdown.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday. I was so surprised.
Yeah, who knew?
The end of an era.
Yeah, and I guess they're going to mobile, and so I wonder. I'm sure that's not in the future right now for Transformice, but I wonder as an MMO designer, do you ever look at mobile, and are you at all interested in exploring that space as a game maker?
Yes, definitely. We actually looked at mobile already. We have an APK of the game lying around somewhere that the players install in a kind of rogue way. Because we've made some tests with it. It runs somehow on Android really slowly, but it runs. But the mobile market is really daring too, because there are so many actors. Everybody's on mobile. You have so much competition over there. Mm-hmm. Transformice in itself was made for a keyboard and mouse, no pun intended. And it's really hard to emulate on the mobile. Also, you have to have a steady connection to servers, so the game is fun. So really, it was not made for mobile initially, and so it's really hard to adapt to mobile. So we always thought that anytime we would go to mobile, it would be with a game that is designed for mobile, and not trying to adapt Transformice and cut some features to adapt it for mobile. And so we made another mobile game, which is a nonetheless runner with a Transformice mouse that is called Run for Cheese. And it was pretty much only to test some languages and some building pipelines to test if we were able to make a mobile app, and we learned a lot from that. And we learned that it was difficult. making a successful mobile game is really, really difficult considering the competition. You have something like maybe 2,000 games a day coming out on the App Store. I think it's the number.
Yeah, no, I can believe it. It's huge.
Yeah, it's really huge, and it's pretty daring, and we have already so much to do with the browser version that we didn't invest much into the mobile, but this is something that we regret a bit. We wanted to, we would have liked to invest more in mobile. It would have been interesting, but you cannot redo history.
When we loaded up this game today, you asked me to actually hide the chat because it's a live game. None of us have any ability to quickly monitor the chat, monitor it, police it, etc. Which means you've suddenly found yourself like as an arbiter of human behavior in a strange way. How would you advise game developers who haven't, maybe they haven't taken any ethics courses, or they haven't studied like how to make groups of people like cohabitate together peacefully? How would you advise them to handle the daunting task of community management when something like this happens, when their game suddenly has a fan base and people can chat with each other?
Well, I haven't made those studies either. I have literally no background in marketing, in human behavior, in anything like that, and it just stumbled on me like that, and it's really, really daring. And I want to take the opportunity to thank my moderation team, because there are over 250 people that are monitoring the game every day, 24 hours a day. And really, we wouldn't be able to run the game without them. They are the backbone of our game, and they are not as much recognized as they deserve. So for developers themselves, I would advise to build as much tools inside the game to so the player can block other players himself. So the typical in your list and stuff, but you have to pay attention that the player is not going to be able to bypass the block with the whispers, with the letter system, with the private message on the forums, with. You just have to check everywhere that everything is pretty much under control. We tried to implement some kind of trial inside the game where the players can vote for one player to be banned, but it's not much used on a daily basis. What is more used is what we call the vote ban. In a room, if someone is being disruptive, everyone can vote by typing ban into the chat, ban and the name of the player. If a player is being disruptive, everyone can vote, and this player is going to be teleported into another room where he's not going to be able to go out and go back to the room. So it's that kind of little tools. Also keep the IP logs as much as you can, because the police is going to ask you for them.
Oh.
we get that kind of story on a daily basis. We get the police we cooperate with the police very often. So in that case, you want to keep everything, the emails, the IP logs, with the some of the messages, not all, because we have some pretty strict regulations in France about the message that you can keep and those that you can't. So yeah, you have to check with your country's regulation about what you can store and what you cannot. And yeah, just pretty much and be prepared for everything to go wrong because they will. So you have to be prepared for that.
So I want to ask. Yeah, I assume most of those interactions with law enforcement come at law enforcement's request, not at yours. And given that most of your players, yeah, are not in France, they're in other countries. You mentioned like Brazil, especially. Do you often have to deal with legal authorities or messages coming in from other countries or other continents?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. How's that? What's that like? Is that weird? Is it fun? Is it stressful? Like.
It can be pretty stressful, but by now I'm used to it. So most of the time they will we are registered within France into a database that says this studio can be contacted there, and there. So some of the country's law enforcement get our contact number very easily. And usually they just shoot us an email on our private message, so they can get in touch with us pretty easily. So they shoot us an email first, and I only ask for a couple documents, not to be able to give IPs and information to regular players. And really, it goes pretty easily. They just ask us for. I know what they are looking for, and I give them the IP logs and the data stamps and the time and date. And that's all they need to go back to an internet provider to get an address. So I try to make their life a lot easier.
Yeah, I can see that. Do you ever consider going back to art, like getting out of game management, game development, and going back into art full time?
Well, I still draw a lot for Transformice, actually. I still design some hats, some furs, some badges, some icons, and I'm doing some illustrations also from time to time. It's been quite some time since I've done one, but I use Twitch for streaming some game development. Well, some art actually.
Nice.
When I'm doing a new fur for Transformice and I have to draw a badge for that fur, I'm always streaming the drawing of the badge. So it's a small half an hour stream where I just draw the badge from zero, and the players really love it.
I noticed on your YouTube channel you have a bunch of animated shorts. Are you involved with the production of those at all?
No, they are made by an external studio. So they asked us for how do you say that in English?
A license?
Yeah, they have the license, and they asked us for a character design Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and but that was pretty much it. They didn't. We weren't very involved in the production of this animated series, so it's pretty much off the game. You don't find a lot of references to the game inside it. You have some for some players that know the game, they will see the references. But for someone who doesn't know the game, it will be a normal cartoon. It's a mute cartoon because we wanted all our players from around the world to enjoy it as soon as it got out, and not have the translation to be able to enjoy it. So that's why the cartoon series is mute.
Yeah, no, I mean, having no dialogue makes localization a lot easier. I would love to know.
They interact with little squeaks, and it makes the whole thing funnier too.
Yeah, it's cute. But like, it must have been strange to come. It seems like it would be strange, rather, to try and come up with a list of characters and their personalities and put it into this Bible, when the game itself seems to be mostly player driven. Did you have to they create a story all of a sudden for this game?
No, I didn't do any of this. And within the animated series, the writers themselves created the characters based on their tropes. that they are used to make into cartoon series. So yeah, suddenly having characters that we never wrote characters for Transformers. It doesn't have any kind of backstory because it's so random. It's something that you incarnate, and so we have a few recurring characters, but yeah, it was pretty strange to suddenly have mice that had a personality.
Do you ever think you're gonna like write some storylines for Transform Ice? You're gonna have some quests or some big events, like create characters?
Yeah, we actually started to add some backstory to Transform Ice last year. When we decided to do a lot more events than previously, but that would be spoiling my talk a little, so I won't go too much into that. But yeah, we've been trying to add some writing to the game, some recurring characters, like for example, last week was the Epiphany. I don't know if that's popular in America, where it's pretty much when you celebrate the three kings going to see kind of stuff. It's pretty popular in France because you eat galette, and it's a king's cake in English.
I knew that. Sorry.
It's complex. I've only. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just pretty popular in France because you get to eat king's cake. So, and we made a sort of backstory where the three shaman queens would be getting gift to the newborn mouse, and so we made a fan art contest out of that, and the players completely clicked with that, and they began pouring fan art over us, and we have so much fan art of the three shaman queens, and the players are very interested in that kind of backstory, even if the game is so random and so silly. They are asking for that kind of backstory, of that kind of Easter eggs and stories, and that's really interesting. And one of my friends is really trying to make me make a Transformice. What's the name? I'm sorry, the words are slipping. A novel adventure kind of game.
Adventure game, otome, light novel, dating sim.
Yeah, an otome game with mice. You have some.
We have pigeons. We have Hatoful boyfriends. So the line has been crossed already.
Yeah, we have horses too. Like, what's the name of that game again?
I forget. AFK Calf says hi from the chat, by the way. She says hi, Melanie.
Yeah, I know her.
Hello. I'm so confused. Are king cakes the thing I remember from Louisiana? They're like the gold and purple and green, and you open them up and there's a baby inside, or is that a different cake?
I think
is that a different cake?
Different cake.
Shoot! I know I've actually had one. But
This all sounds familiar, but yeah, it's like a weird melange.
It's made with a lot of butter and almond paste and a lot of sugar.
Yeah, it's a heart attack on a plate.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I wish we had more of those here. That sounds nice.
Yeah, the French will take any opportunity to eat and make cakes.
Yeah. How do you feel? I mean, so earlier you talked about you advocate that French developers need to be learning English and need to be aware of at least the English game development world in order to grow France's game development scene. And but here in the U.S., we're all talking about how new game developers need to be getting ready for China or Brazil. And you've actually been to Brazil, so how do you feel about obviously I think there's an argument for going anywhere in the world, really, but how do you feel about like the fact that the world is getting even bigger than you first imagined when it comes to game development?
I think it's kind of different for French to learn English than for an English to learn Chinese or Brazilian.
Yeah.
English is so global that you need to know it. There's no question asked. And it's different for China and Brazil. You really need to localize your game into Brazilian Portuguese because Brazilian Portuguese is different from Portuguese.
Yeah.
And you really need to localize your game for those countries, definitely. But I wouldn't advocate for learning Brazilian Portuguese or Chinese, because this is going to be not that much useful for you into the industry. If you know English, you'll pretty much get anywhere. But it's really important that you localize your games, definitely, for those countries.
Sure.
AFKCAF does want to know how many people are involved in the moderation team overall, or if you're allowed to say that.
I said that before. It's 250 people,
Wow.
volunteers, and inside the office, I have 2 community managers that handle support and those volunteers and the moderation. So it's like maybe 250 and 2, I guess, with the 2 community managers.
So we talked earlier about how your talk's on Wednesday, and I'm sure it's going to go fantastic. But what else are you looking forward to at GDC? Like, you've been a few times. Is there a specific talk or somebody you want to meet or some event you always go to that's important to you?
Well, I've only been twice there, so it's really. I always go out of GDC kind of transformed, because I had to take all this information so in such a short frame that it changes my perspective on many. Oh, oops! I think you disconnected, Brian.
Yeah, someone said the server was crashing in there. Everyone said the game was freezing. Should I just restart the game?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm
no
going
problem.
to see, because maybe I can fix it. Let me test it.
I mean, we're coming to the end of our hour, so it's if you need to fix it because you need to go fix the game.
No, I think that works. I think you just got logged off for some reason, but
It's weird that it was affecting the whole room. That's fine though. Right on. Yeah. I guess as like Alex said, we're coming to the end of the hour here. What do you I guess like what are you looking forward to most at GDC this year besides your own talk, of course?
yeah.
It's okay to say you don't know. A lot of people don't know till they get there.
Yeah, I don't really know, because my talk is definitely going to be the pinnacle of it, and I don't think I will be able to think about anything else.
Oh my god, that it's just consuming all your time, isn't it? Right? Like you're
Yes, it is totally in my thought, and I'm really stressed about it. No, the conferences are really nice. Sometimes I'm not very social, and I get pretty stressed by going to talk to people, because GDC is so huge that people tend to keep into their little circles, and so it's pretty hard to fit in. But I've been there for 2 years, so I will definitely see some faces that I know, so I will be able to get into the groups more easily. But I admit the first year was daring on this point, because I didn't know anyone, and I was like, what do I do?
Yeah. What advice?
I didn't want to barge into the already made groups, and that was complicated.
Well, what advice would you give for someone like you, a developer who's you're not coming in here new, you're experienced, you've been working in games for a while, but it's your first time at a conference like this. What would you tell someone who's like you, who's like looking to make friends or looking to like talk to people they know but they don't really know anyone? What would you say to them?
Well, just say don't be afraid to talk to people. For example, it was very funny. I was attending a lecture at GDC, and I was speaking to my neighbor on my right, and because some words in English were slipping to me, And I asked him some question, and it turns out that he was the CTO of Mmorpg, our biggest competitor. And we and I asked him, "Hey, what do you work on?" And he was like, "Hey, Mmorpg," and I was like, "No, why?" And so we just went out of the room and we talked for 4 hours together.
And we immediately threw down. We were like, all right, only one of us is walking out of this conference alive.
Yeah.
This town ain't big enough for the two of us.
Yeah, totally. And we actually have a lot to learn from each other. And he gave me some so precious advice for something I'm not going to talk about here. But it really was awesome. That kind of encounter you can only make at GDC. Mm-hmm. Like your next neighbor made the game you're such a fan of. Like you get into a conference and you get past a multi-experienced veteran and you realize it. Oh shit, I'm shaman.
Okay. That's a good note to actually end on. I think so. Hopefully people in our audience, because we're on Twitch, we're on the creative side. So hopefully people who want to get into game development show up at GDC, and hopefully they get to have a similar experience.
Maybe we can take some questions from the stream. I don't know. There are about 70 people, but I don't see much activity in the chat.
Yeah, it's been happy to hear you talk.
Yeah, it's been a little. Sometimes the chat is very busy, and sometimes people genuinely. We actually had someone tell us a couple weeks ago, "Please stop talking. I just want to watch Tanya work," because that was Tanya was working. She was doing some live quest design with us, and they were like, "She knows more. You guys be quiet. We just want to watch her go." Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for showing up. This is really cool. Transfer Mice is a really cool game. If you haven't heard of it, feel free to check it out. Check out Melanie and the art she does. We are Gamasutra. We would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel if you want to see more cool game development interviews. And you can catch Melanie's talk if you're going to GDC on Wednesday at what time, Melanie? Because we have times now. We can talk about those.
Yeah, it's midday.
Midday at noon?
Nice.
Yeah, noon. Yeah.
Noon. Yeah, and you can click on the link below, and you can you can get more information about the talk there. I'm Bryant Francis, contributing editor to Gamasutra, and Alex and Melanie. If you can say goodbye to everyone, we'll shut it all down.
After you, Melanie.
Thanks for hanging out, even if it was pretty quiet, and I hope you enjoyed the little stream.
Yeah. Absolutely, it was a fantastic talk. Thank you so much for joining us. I've been Alex Warrow with an editor. I've been Alex Warrow, an editor of Gamasutra with an editor of Gamasutra, and Bryant. And also, I should point out, Gamasutra and GDC are both owned by UBM Americas, so we are sibling organizations. So just so you know, we love GDC because
we're paid.
We just do.
We're paid by them.
No, well, I mean, and that.
So, it's cool. It's cool, but full disclosure.
As much as Melanie said you should come to GDC, you should also just get out and be involved in your local game dev community, even if you can't get to GDC.
Shout out to the French game dev community.
That's right. It's on the rise. All right. So thank you all so much, and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.